Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Christina Francois. I am one of the co-founders of the Black Collective, and I also have
Also, Fran here, also one of the co-founders of the Black Collective with y'all.
And so today we're going to be providing a mid-session update. For those of you that don't know, we are nearing the end of legislative session, which happens once a year in Tallahassee, where really there is a 60-day crunch to pass as many new laws as possible. And we're really gonna see when we get into it today that they're really trying to pass a wide array of some really terrible bills, unfortunately. But we are here to break it down. That's why it's called the breakdown. And give an update on where our legislative priorities are. We highly encourage you all to ask questions. This is supposed to be a time for us to not just talk about what our priorities are, but to really help explain the process. Tallahassee is far away from for most folks. And so we often don't really get to understand all of the moving pieces that go into making a bill of law. So
that goes into making the chaos and the craziness that comes out of the Capitol. And so, yeah, so there's definitely a lot of things that we have to talk about. Legislative session ends March 11th, so literally right around the corner. We are this week wrapped up week 7, so we have 2 more weeks left of legislative session, and this has been none like no other. And I can say that, you know, knowing that I've talked to one of my mentors who's been in the Capitol for over 30 years, and even she has said the same thing of like in her 30 plus years in the Capitol, she has never seen a legislative session like this. A legislative session that, again, doesn't prioritize the needs of the people of Florida, but politicizes every single issue to galvanize their bases as we get ready for the 2022 midterm election cycle. So we're just gonna kind of jump into it. Yep. Really, there ain't really much else to do but to kind of
and there's a lot to cover. So
but like yeah, let's just tell y'all the truth. Like, let's just tell y'all what it is. And so again, if you're not familiar with the Black Collective, we are in a movement committed to promoting a shared agenda to elevate the political consciousness and amplify the economic power of Black communities. And with that, we, again, our work is very hyperlocal in Miami-Dade County, where we are actively working with our amazing team of organizers in Central Miami-Dade County and North Miami-Dade County to build Black political power, to build our people up to really be able to lean into politics and truly understand the power that we have as people to really be able to change our conditions and really build out thriving communities. And so with that, we're gonna jump into, again, legislative session. So you'll see with this conversation, which was a little different from the first conversation, we're just gonna kind of be dropping with y'all a lot of headlines so y'all can see that these things are being talked about. You may not know and you may not hear them, but they are definitely being talked about within political circles. And so we want to make sure that you all know what these bills are, you understand what these bills are, you understand the harm that these bills would actually create in our communities, and so that you can be very vocal and active to advocate and really get people to actually not support these bad pieces of legislation. So we're going to start with House Bill 11. Which is the first one. And the headline that you see here was something that happened a couple of months ago, right before legislative session, that almost kind of slipped through the radar of community, was Alex Rizzo, who is a white Cuban here in Miami-Dade County Republican, trying to actually trying to get the Miami-Dade County Commission, if you can believe that, to pass a resolution to support a witness intimidation bill. And this bill, again, essentially would create a law that would be if you're harassing or stopping a police officer from doing their duties, they would actually have the authority to actually arrest you on site for disturbing and disrupting their work. And so thankfully, our commissioners, our county commissioners, the majority had the good sense to listen to the community and our concerns around this bill, so that we, again, not introduce another bill that is going to try to criminalize people. And we know specifically who it's going to impact is going to be Black and brown communities that are going to be targeted because of the increased discretion of law enforcement. Thankfully, this bill has not moved an inch during legislative session. And the fact that, again, it was assigned to 3 committees in the Senate, 3 committees in the House, has not been heard in one, but that doesn't mean that we let up. It doesn't mean that we stop doing the work, because there's a lot that can happen between now and the 11th. And we'll get more into that when we go into the process. Chris, I don't know if you want to go to the next one. Yeah, so this one.
Yes. Sorry, you know, I'm doing double duty. I'm gonna post this everywhere. So just so you know, if you are watching this live or on our Zoom, we are actually dropping links to the articles for you to be able to read yourselves at a later date. So definitely check out the chat. Sorry about that. So this one is very alarming. I feel like it's building off of last year's anti-protesting bill, further restricting protesting. This would make it illegal for you to be able to protest in front of someone's home. And on its face, it sounds like, okay, well, I guess people deserve their privacy. However, technically the street and the sidewalk is public space. And so it's another chipping away at where it is you can exercise your First Amendment right. And there should be no restrictions on your First Amendment right to protest. Secondly, and one of the examples that I liked that one of our organizers mentioned, is that imagine that you are being abused by your landlord and decide or are evicted and decide to protest in front of your home. That technically would be prohibited by this law. And so while it's being framed as being able to protect the safety of elected officials and decision makers, it actually can be very, very harmful to our community.
And the only thing that I will add to this bill, and you'll see kind of like the headlines here around Derek Chauvin's family home, which again kind of triggered the Orange County Sheriff's Office to try to get the Orange County Commission to pass a local ordinance around residential picketing. And what was very interesting was that the Orange County Commission was like, we're not passing this. We're not passing another law to criminalize our community. And so what did the sheriff do? Sheriff John Mena, he went to the state legislature because he knew that, again, once again, we know, and the assumption always is that they love to imprison us. They love to increase the prison population. They love to criminalize particularly Black and brown individuals. And so he knew that it would be easy for him to pass this piece of legislation in Tallahassee. And that's exactly what happened. So the Orange County Commission said no to this, and then he took it to Tallahassee. And you could see this happening during the testimonies during each of the stops around this bill. The sponsors of the bill couldn't even articulate what the purpose of this bill was. They couldn't understand that there's actually over 13 laws already on the books that addresses issues of harassment, that addresses issues of litter and loitering. All of these pieces of bills already, all of these laws already exist. And so people were asking, why do we then need this new law to, again, target residential picketing, or what we call criminalizing neighborhood presence? And every time the sponsors had to look to the sheriff to come and answer the question. And that tells you what's happening in Tallahassee, that these sponsors of these bills can't even articulate why they're moving this bill, what's the importance or the significance or the benefit of this bill. It's the person who actually went to them and asked them to file this bill in the first place is who has to get up and basically make the case for them. And so this bill, again, is it at any time can hit the floor. It has made it through both of its committees in the House, and it has made it through all three of its committees in the Senate. And so at any moment, probably sometime next week, we will see this bill being voted on, possibly in both the House and the Senate. And so it's been very disappointing because there's been multiple attempts to work with the sponsors of these bills for them to, again, clarify language around the vagueness of public spaces, public buildings. There's questions of whether or not people will be able to now protest in front of the governor's mansion, which is the people's mansion, which is funded by taxpayer dollars, and whether or not we would be arrested for protesting in front of the governor's mansion. And so, yeah, so we're basically kind of like, again, actively working on the inside to really put pressure on this, but we can't be the only ones. We also need other folks to be able to do the same thing. So, yeah.
So this one, again, further limiting our First Amendment right to protest, the right to gather in public spaces. This bill would actually make it so that organizers of an event or attendees of a protest would actually be responsible for paying fees and fines related to hosting such an event. So I'm gonna pass to you, Fran, because you know where the bill stands. Because
So again, this goes back to I remember the sponsor of this bill talking about like it's the pop-up issues. Like we just have too many pop-up issues where events are popping up, and then who has to pay for this? The towing of the cars and all of these things. And so now they're trying to pass the cost on to the people who actually host the events. And so again, one of the questions that was brought up by Senator Bobby Powell during one of the debates was like, could a protest potentially be considered a pop-up event? Because again, you're going to have a certain amount of people who's going to post on social media, meet up at this place, we're about to rally and protest around something. And now again, you're infringing on the First Amendment right to actually peacefully assemble and the right to protest, and again, free speech. And so again, this bill has also moved through all three of its committees in the House, all three of its committees in the Senate. And we're basically kind of at the point of waiting to see when this bill is actually going to be heard on the floor. And so again, two bills that are essentially an extension of HB1 could also become law by the end of this legislative session. So this one.
I feel like we talked about this the most in part one.
Yeah, we did talk the most about this in part one, and it's literally because
it's horrible. That's why.
Horrible. It's a horrible bill. And to my dismay, seeing this week, 14 Democrats stood with the Republicans and voted in support of this bill on the House floor. And so that is very troubling to hear. That was very troubling to see. And again, this bill basically institutes or puts in place a rental fee a monthly rental fee instead of the traditional security deposit. So we know when we move into an apartment, you pay your first month, your last month, and you pay your security deposit, something that is assured to you to be returned back to you should, again, disregarding the regular wear and tear, you should be able to get that security deposit back if there's no major damages to your apartment. And so rather than that, there's this major corporation going around the country, and you'll see here in the Sun Sentinel article that was actually written last night, that basically uplifts this company LeaseLock that has been going around the country under the disguise of renter's choice, saying that a renter should have a choice to either pay a fee or the traditional security deposit. And so what people are not fully understanding, though, is that your security deposit, again, is something that can be returned to you. These monthly fees, there's no responsibility of the landlord to put this money aside in escrow or in an account that you could have access to when you're moving. This money is basically money that they're capturing from you. And at the end of your lease, they can charge you for all of the fees and repairs,
and I think that's the thing, is that
covered by a security deposit.
Exactly, is that any damages, you would still be liable to any damages or any repairs that would be necessary. So literally, you're just giving them extra money.
Yeah.
It's a way to increase your rent without saying that it's a rent increase, basically. And it's
Exactly.
really disheartening that it is, Democrats from South Florida in particular, that are jumping on and supporting this bill.
Yes.
And again, it's being fast tracked.
Yeah, no, yeah, it's definitely being fast tracked. We're waiting to see when it's going to be heard on the Senate side. Most likely what's going to happen is that the House version of the bill is going to be sent over to the Senate side, and that's what essentially is going to be picked up. And so we're just kind of like in the wait and see mode to see what's going to happen with that. But again, I can't stress my disappointment when you hear of Anika Omfra, who's in Broward County, Benjamin, Representative Benjamin, who's also in Broward County, when you hear Kevin Chambliss, who's in South Dade, for God's sakes. You had all of these, particularly Black elected officials in Miami-Dade, Broward, who actually voted in support of this, really trying under the guise of like, this helps renters. And I'm like, we literally have been hearing from renters who have been begging these elected officials to not vote in support of this because, again, of the fear of like, your base is essentially a poor tax. Because I can't afford to buy a home, which we know in this moment with this market, one, just a shortage of homes. Two, as homeowners, with your mortgage, your property taxes that continue to increase, your home insurance that continues to increase, many people don't have a choice but to rent. And then now to then have to have an additional monthly fee as an option for the landlord. And we know although the bill does say that this is a choice for the landlord,
that most landlords are
not gonna opt to put in the fee because there is no cap to the fee. There is no cap on the length of time that they can actually put this fee in place. And so that's the biggest problem with this. And many housing advocates tried to work with the sponsors to be like, look at some of the other versions of this across the country, because again, it looks like that y'all are bent on passing this bill, but let's try to make it a little bit more better and not make it so harmful for the consumer. So one of the things that conversations were had around was putting the money in escrow, so that again, this is not money that the landlord is just wasting and spending, but that there's an opportunity for the renter to recover those costs. There were attempts to put a cap to say that you cannot go over this amount of money over what the monthly rent is, or this percentage over the rent, but all of those failed, and those are Democrat amendments where they attempted to do so. And so it is very disappointing again to see the amount of Democrats that supported this bill: Robin Bartleman, Dan Daly, and Broward County. Like no understanding of why this actually happened and why this passed in the House. And so we're just going to have to wait to see what happens on the Senate side. So,
oh God. So this bill would make cities and counties come up with a business impact statement on any proposed ordinance. And it would also require that all or any ordinance would have to be suspended if a business files a lawsuit against a county or city, saying that they're harmed by the ordinance. And not only does it suspend ordinances which disproportionately benefit working people, but it would also require us to pay for the legal fees of businesses. So we already know, as a society, Americans love to sue people. So let's just keep that in mind. Let's think of all of the frivolous lawsuits that can be charged against cities and counties because of harm done to folks' business by having things like a living wage, by having things like environmental standards, by having things like labor standards, by having things like masking. Like the possibilities are endless in the ways that this really stifles cities and counties' ability to be able to pass ordinances that actually improve the quality of life of Floridians. And so not only is this pro-business, this is really an attack on the power of cities and counties.
Yeah, and you can see it right here. Joshua Simmons, vice mayor in Coral Springs, wrote this op-ed around residents, not out-of-state businesses, should govern Florida cities. And he essentially said that this bill incentivizes a race to the bottom that will damage local governments and intimidate them. again, from actually being able to do good things for their constituents, because now they're going to be fearful that every time they move an ordinance, a wage ordinance, a potential housing measure that addresses the affordable housing crisis, a developer may come sue them, or a business may come sue them to recover their lost revenue. And so it's very concerning, again, when Tallahassee continues to interfere in local governance, again, to kind of chill the innovation that we know cities are taking the lead on across the country. And so, yeah, so right now we're basically kind of like at a standstill, wait and see to hear whether or not this bill is actually going to be heard on the House side, because the Senate moved lightning speed. This was a priority of the Senate president. Mind you, the Senate president is running for the agricultural commissioner. And so,
who's responsible
who's responsible for consumer services,
protecting consumers
and businesses and licensing and all of this stuff. And now this man basically is running for an office where he is setting it up for it to be to the benefit of corporations and not for the people. And so consumer services in Florida could potentially drop even worse than they are right now when it comes to responses and how we can actually hold businesses accountable. And so it has been added to the second reading calendar, but it has not been added to the special order calendar, which means that it hasn't actually been agendaed for the House floor, but that did happen. The second reading calendar was on the 23rd. So just a couple of days ago. And so we're now basically waiting to see when it will actually be picked up on the House floor, because the Senate version, as I mentioned, has already passed. And we're just, again, we're calling this the Ending Local Freedoms bill, because again, that's essentially what it's going to be doing. Is it's going to stop local government from being able to do right by their people.
Oh Lord.
Gosh.
So the way that I like to frame this is, do you remember when we restored voting rights at the ballot? Do you remember when we passed medical marijuana at the ballot? Do you remember when we decided to change who constitutional, well, I guess the constitutional officers thing would be allowable, but there are so many, every election, there are so many issues that are on the ballot, particularly because they get blocked or are not taken up by the legislature. One of the strengths of the Florida Constitution is the ability to for citizens to pass citizen petitions and get things on the ballot for voters to be able to decide directly. And this bill specifically attacks that right and says we can no longer have issues be addressed, issues that actually matter to constituents on the ballot. We can only have structural issues addressed, like the structure of government, which we know folks aren't really checking for the structure of government. Like, nobody cares if there are more constitutional officers or not. Like, no, we care about issues that are being ignored by our representatives in Tallahassee. And this really strips away our direct democracy, I think is how you frame it, Fran.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's literally what this is. It's just like it's almost kind of like, I'm like, what's the simplest way I can say this? So the legislator peep game, and they realize, oh snap, whenever we don't move something, the citizens then take action themselves and they move the issue. Because we've been debating minimum wage for like maybe 15 years and we refuse to increase minimum wage. And the legislature has been controlled by the Republicans for the past 20 years. And so they were like, we ain't never putting minimum wage. We ain't never voting for minimum wage. And so what did we do last election cycle? It ended up on the ballot and we increased minimum wage, and it's going to be increasing $1 per year until it gets to $15. And so with that, they're just like, we got to stop these citizens. Like, this is getting out of control. Like, and you can see, and I pulled the clip from the article where he said, the sponsor of this bill said, Florida is a republic, not a direct democracy. And voters are like lawmakers to make policies, so they don't have to. And so he's like, we're tired of seeing all these ballot initiatives because y'all voted us into office for us to do right by y'all. But I'm like, but y'all haven't been doing right by us, which is why we have to take initiative as the voters to actually address the issues that y'all are not willing to do, because look at all the stuff that we've been talking about so far. Well, how are these priorities when we're in the middle of a housing crisis, in the middle of unemployment, when we talk about the resources that our teachers don't need to actually properly teach our students? Like, we have a lot of issues in the state, but what you choose to prioritize is not what we need to improve our quality of life. So therefore we use the tools that are available to us. And now you have said, y'all been using this too effectively and we actually need to strip it away from y'all. What I will say is that this is a joint resolution, which means that even if it passes the Senate floor, the House floor, the governor signs it, he doesn't veto it, it comes to us as voters. So we essentially, as the voters, are making the decision on whether or not we should continue to have the power to affect change and to make our lives better in Florida. And so if this passes in November, this will be on the ballot with so many other things. And so we don't want y'all to miss it and making sure that you're voting no on this proposal, because to vote yes on this says that we don't want to be able to ever be able to increase the minimum wage again. We don't want to be able to protect unions in the state of Florida. We like, there's so medicinal marijuana and the extensions on, it doesn't have to just be medicinal, but that we can have, but that we can legalize marijuana in the state of Florida. And so all of those things would be limited if this actually passes and the voters actually approve it on the ballot in November. And so we still got time, even after the March legislative session, to make sure that this does not pass in November. And we as voters actually take a stance and say that we are not a republic, we are a democracy. That is what we are. And we are engaging in this process because we have a right to engage in this process.
Oh God. Okay. So let me tell you, this is my jam. You may have done this. It is like a unique period in time where you see the Archbishop and the speaker for the spokesperson for the governor go back and forth publicly, where you have religious leaders across the state, where you have Pedro Pen, like children of the Pedro Pen evacuation and others really taking a hard stand, where this is just such a cruel and unnecessary bill that overreaches even what federal law requires. So this law would require that it would mandate that all local governments cooperate with on all local governments and local law enforcement enter into a 287G agreement, which over the last decade, we've like really shifted away from that. It would also prohibit the use of any contractor or vendor that has engaged in the movement of undocumented or refugee children. And some people see that this is just a messaging bill. Again, another thing that is a priority of the governor to feel, for his 2024 election. However, this has, real consequences for immigrant residents in our state. And it just contributes to more fear and confusion for folks that, make up more than 20% of our population, right? And so, Fran, where are we at with this bill?
Oh my gosh. I mean, so this bill, and also keep in mind that this is a bill that almost for 10 years in some way, shape, or form has continued to try to move through the legislature, but hasn't been successful. And so this is the first legislative session where we can say that this bill has legs and it has the potential to become law. And so in the House side, it has made it through all of its committees. It was added to the second reading calendar on Friday. And so now we're basically just waiting for when they will add it to the special order calendar and actually vote on it on the House floor. And there we know, again, Republicans have the majority. It's going to be whether or not a Democrat actually joins them in the vote. And so we know in the past, Representative James Bush, who represents partially part of a Black immigrant community, has been voting with the Republicans in support of this bill. And so we're not going to be surprised if he joins them in support of this vote. And on the Senate side, it had 3 committees of reference, but they pulled it. from the Appropriations Committee. And so again, this meant that this was a priority, and we already knew it was a priority because the number 2 in the Senate, this was his bill. You have Aaron Bean, who is the Senate President pro tem. So the number 2 in charge of the Senate was the one carrying this bill. And so they were going to bend to him. And so it made it out of its last 2 committees. And so now we're waiting to see when it'll be agendaed on the Senate floor as well. And so again, part of the governor's agenda around targeting immigrant communities and really targeting the Biden administration and how they have been doing really, I mean, I won't say a really good job, but a decent job compared to, effective job compared to who we had before around responding to unaccompanied minors, to refugees, to people who are presenting themselves at the border. And so we'll continue to watch this, but this is also likely to move through the floor and potentially also become law by the end of legislative session. Yeah.
Oh God. Okay. So I'm going to editorialize and then I'm going to pass it to Fred to actually tell you what's in the bill, but I'm going to tell you how I interpret the bill. Okay. So apparently, and you'll notice there's a theme, right? In that whenever we make any progress on any issue, it seems like bam, there's a bill, there's a national effort that Florida is the breeding ground for testing to criminalize or punish our communities for daring to vision a different future. So when we talk about all of the work around the racial reckoning of 2020, all of the effective organizing that has happened, all of the real hard conversations that most Americans are actually finally ready to have, folks who really are committed to upholding white supremacy are just not having it. So we have, again, a number 1 priority of our governor, to introduce the anti-woke bill. Can I just say, who even says woke anymore? That was my number 1 thing. Also, I want to know the intern who actually found the words to make up the acronym woke, because I don't even know what the W, the O, and the K, and the E stand for, but it does stand for something, by the way. This whole concept of like individual freedom, or just this appropriating of the word freedom is just very alarming. And this is one of many bills that are, again, being introduced across the country, but really is setting to limit, again, our First Amendment right, sound familiar, to actually talk about race and gender. Mm-hmm. This is like cishet white men are that threatened by our existence that we can't even talk or learn about the facts and reality. Yeah. And so I called it the white fragility bill. I know that folks call it the white discomfort bill and a whole bunch of other names, but it is very, very clear that it's trying to codify the feelings and concerns of a shrinking majority of people, that actually is very, very detrimental to the future of people in our state. When we're not learning actual history, how are we prepared to be in the world? If we're not actually learning how to talk to each other and with each other, then how are we supposed to function as a society? So that's my little soapbox. I'll pass to Fred to actually tell y'all what's in the bill, but it's also embarrassing that this is what Florida is known for right now.
What Florida is known for right now. So the Stop Woke, which is the Stop Wrongs Against Our Kids and Employee Act, is a bill that essentially is barring us from talking about white supremacy, whether it is in the classroom and whether it is in the workplace. That is essentially what this bill is attempting to do. It literally talks about like the whole thing of subjecting an individual, whether it's in the whether it's in a workplace or whether it's in a school or in a training, around the concepts or constructs of moral superiority, of another race. So essentially saying that we're talking way too much about white supremacy right now, and we need to stop talking about it. And in Florida, it's going to be just that. We cannot talk about specifically white supremacy in the state of Florida. There are many things, again, like we cannot talk about, there are people who are inherently racist or sexist or oppressive, based, consciously or unconsciously. We cannot create guilt and anguish.
Anguish. That's what the one that kills me.
And again, it literally goes back to the guilt and anguish and psychological distress because of what their ancestors may have done. And literally, again, these are the things that are written in here, and it's completely crazy. But then on top of that, because this is not just about race, and again, ACLU has framed this very well around the censorship of race and gender, is that what this bill goes through, and it's a 30-page bill, it doesn't really take that long to read, is what you'll then start noticing is that they're crossing out everywhere in our current statutes that says gender, it is being replaced with sex. And we know there's a difference.
Same thing.
There's a very big difference between your biological and how you society basically acknowledges you and how you acknowledge yourself. And so this, again, is creating a space for like our transgender youth, our transgender friends and family, and whether or not they're actually going to be able to be acknowledged in spaces. And they literally, and again, they replace ethnicity with color.
Which is not a thing. I mean, are we in 1960?
So we colored folks, we ain't ethnic, our ethnicities don't. So literally, you can see it through the bill. It's just like a crossing out wherever there's ethnicity, it's being replaced with color. Wherever there's gender, it's being replaced with sex. And at the end of the day, although there were amendments that were made to this bill, and there were amendments, again, that specifically talks about the age appropriateness of being able to talk about the African diaspora and the contributions of Black Americans or African Americans within American society and such. At the end of the day, this is still a bad bill because you're essentially saying that we cannot talk about certain things, and we cannot talk about white supremacy, which is rooted and ingrained in the fabric of this country. This is what this country was based upon. We know the genocide that has happened at the hands of our indigenous people in our communities and what they have lost at the hands of white supremacists. And so not being able to, again, root our true history of the United States to talk about racism, to talk about white supremacy, the way that it permeates through our institutions, our systems, the structures of how the functionality of the United States is a disservice, again, to not just our children, but it's a disservice to all of us, because again, we're basically being told a lie, or things are being omitted. The truths are being omitted. The convenient truths are being omitted from our real discussions about history in the United States. And so we stand in firm opposition to this bill. And again, this bill has moved at a rapid speed. There's a reason why it's number 7. It's because it was a very clear priority of the legislature and of the governor. And so it has made it through every single committee of the House. It has passed the House floor. The vote was 74 to 41. It has been sent over to message in the Senate, and it will be heard on March 1st. In the Rules Committee, which is the last committee before it hits the Senate floor. So this bill will become law. The way that our teachers teach history, the strain, the surveillance that is going to be on our teachers in the classroom and the ways that they teach history is going to be real. Once school
human
starts,
resources departments, like
whole
DEI department, not just about schools.
Whole DEI department, DEI consultants, all of these people essentially are almost going to be out of
you
work.
You can actually talk about protected statuses in the workplace. Like this is not like another critical race theory bill that does nothing. This is actually a highly effective and dangerous bill that impacts not just children, but adults, not just schools, but also workplaces. And it is really undoing the past 60 years of progress for racial and gender justice.
Yeah. So those were all of our legislative priorities, because again, as at the Black Collective, we have a set of legislative priorities that we are basically tracking. We are engaging our base, we are engaging our allies, making sure that they are grounded and centered, have the talking points, know how to actively talk about these things in opposition. And so it's, again, very important for us that we be able to, again, kind of uplift that for you all, so that y'all kind of know like where things are, what we're tracking, and definitely our concerns around them. But there definitely is a lot of other bills that are
so
moving.
many.
This session, a lot of bad bills. You have the Don't Say Gay bill, where again, depending on what age the child is, you can't talk about, basically being gay. And again, this goes back into, and it's not even about the child, because people get lost in what does a child know about being gay, and such like that. But this goes back to children who have gay parents won't be able, when we have the assignment about our family tree, they won't be able to acknowledge their parents. So again, it's like that erasure of who they are. Children won't be able to speak to those things. And so it's again, like very unfortunate to see that bill has been moving. I know like there's been amendments. I know there was like an update yesterday of like, I think it was like about 6 or 7 Republicans actually joined the Democrats in opposition to the bill. So I think they're starting to hear people's concerns around the bill, but we still have a ways to go, because we know that even though at times they're able to kill a bill on the floor, it doesn't mean that it's not going to come back up. And so the bill can continue to come back in different forms. And it's literally like, it ain't over until it's over. It ain't over until that handkerchief drops on the in the middle of the 4th floor rotunda and sine die is declared, because that's just the reality of how things can continue to come up. We also know about the anti-abortion ban that's moving through, the 15-week abortion ban that does not exclude incest, rape, human trafficking. There are considerations for the health of the mother. There are considerations for the health of the child. But again, you don't have a right to tell me what I can and cannot do with my body. And what always baffles me was this whole moment of COVID and people screaming like, you don't have a right to tell me to get vaccinated. It is my choice to get vaccinated. My body. I know, my body, my choice. It is so bad at that. My choice to wear a mask, but then you want to tell a woman what she can and can't do with her body. I never understand this. And then it literally always goes back to the whole politicization of issues and the distractions, because again, America is a place where we get so caught up in social issues. And if you look at places in Europe, most of their conversations are around finances, financials, the decisions that are made around financials. How are we spending money? Class, how are we spending how we're spending government resources, and it's about class. But in the United States, many things are about social issues, and it's simply because there are distractions from the bigger things that are being done that we're not paying attention to. Where again, and I say this all the time, and this is my personal opinion, not the opinion of the Black Collective, where because I start going into like a conspiracy rabbit hole where the democracy is crumbling around us. Like our democracy is crumbling, and we're leaning more and more into an autocracy, which means that there's corporate interests that are actually governing this society. It is no longer the people that are governing, it is corporations. And we already know with Citizens United, where they basically gave corporations personhood, that's what the reality of the United States has become more and more, is that corporations are the ones that are deciding. They are the ones that are writing the laws or drafting the laws, literally writing them out, and pushing them out there, that again, that take no consideration for the harm that they're going to be creating in our society, not just amongst individuals, but literally throughout our society. And that's the reality of what's happening right now, is that these things are distractions from the bigger issues, where it's like people are going hungry. We have an increasing unsheltered population. Again, the housing crisis, unemployment crisis, like access to food, water, all of these things that are so much huge issues. The environment, for God's sakes, that people want to. We're literally going underwater. I don't know. It's really sinking, but nobody wants to talk about those issues. But we're being pulled into these conversations around things that, again, Supreme Court has already made decisions on, but they are now kind of on this crusade of, we need to challenge these things now that we have the majority in the Supreme Court to be able to overturn these things, which then would get us dragged into like another fight, another battle for like the next 20, 30 years. And again, end up in a Handmaid's Tale kind of situation. I've been talking about this becoming the Handmaid's Tale for so long, but now I finally see it. Yeah, it's like you finally see it. Yeah. The number of abortion, like mind you, just for context, half of South America has decriminalized abortion. And here we are criminalizing abortion. We have been celebrating it over the past couple of weeks. Yes. Countries that are heavily Catholic have literally been majority Catholic countries. But here we are here, like at
But
the
we're the land of
center.
freedom.
Yeah, at the center. Yeah, you know how DeSantis opened up his State
We're
of the
the
Union
freest
saying
state.
that we are the freest state in the nation. I was like, I don't know where he heard that, or I don't want to say inappropriate, but I was just like, I don't know where he heard that. And where he was coming from that, talking about we are the freest state when every law is literally being passed to literally criminalize us just for
Everything.
opening our mouth. And just for the teacher opening their mouth, the teacher can lose their jobs. And again, this is what it's leading to in our society. It's like the diminishing of like access to things, because now like our kids are not getting appropriate education because we don't have enough teachers, because teachers are like, they're surveilling the classroom. Or we're getting to the point of like what Iowa is doing right now, which is introducing laws around putting cameras in every single classroom to surveil our teachers. And so this is where we are right now. We also have the preemption of local responsible wage ordinances. And this also goes to preemption of state interference. Again, it would prevent local governments from being able to require contractors to pay a responsible wage. We know that there are people who get contracts with Miami-Dade County, who are at the airport, who are at the port, who are developers. And because you come into contract with government, and government is essentially giving you our money to do things for our communities, you are responsible for paying your workers a responsible wage. And that means sometimes a worker who would have traditionally been getting $10 on a job, because they got a contract, because their employer got a contract with the county, has to pay has to pay $15, maybe have to pay $20. And so they went around the local government and was like, we need to go to Tallahassee because we don't want to pay this money anymore. And so if this bill becomes law, I'm sorry to all the journeymen, to all the construction workers, to the people who are working in our airports who are making more than minimum wage right now. You're going to drop to minimum wage. You're going to drop to $10 an hour instead of that $14, $15, $17, $19, $20 an hour that you're making right now, because literally we have no understanding of why they even thought this was a good bill to introduce in the first place. But it's literally going to create more pay gaps throughout the state. And then the last one after that was the solar bill. This one again goes back to FPL controls everything. FPL is literally in the middle of an entire scandal around shadow candidates, and was like, too many people are getting solar panels. And we need to figure out how to stop this. And we don't want to have to buy your excess energy. And we don't want to have to do net metering, which means that, because of what I collect during the day, I use less of it at night. Which means that my FPL bill is lower. FPL is like, no, we want to be able to collect all that money back. And so this bill is moving, which essentially is going to crush the solar panel industry. And there are many small business owners who have been going up to Tallahassee saying that you're essentially going to kill my business if you pass this bill.
Because one of the really great workforce development that has happened in the last 5 years has been a lot of independent contractors starting their own small business to install solar panels. Again, this actually does disproportionately harm our Black communities and communities of color across the state who have found this as a well-paying job, and also an opportunity to actually become entrepreneurs for energy of the future, right?
So we're gonna pivot to the process now.
We have a few minutes left.
I know, we only have a few minutes left, so we're gonna pivot to the process. So again, session ends March 11th. The last day for committees to meet is March 1st, so literally around the corner next week. But there's an exception. Rules committees can continue to meet. So a lot of the bills that we mentioned, the only committee that they have left to go to is the Rules Committee, which is why we're saying a lot of these bills could become law. And again, people can ask the Senate President to agenda another committee. Those are, again, special requests that usually are not granted. But again, it still keeps going. They're about to start entering the phase around the budget. So that's essentially what happens. Once March 1st starts, they need the remainder 2 weeks to literally negotiate the budget, be able to move things. But that's where we have to watch, especially for the things that haven't been moving, riders and amendments that can be attached to criminal justice packages, that can be attached to education packages. So we'll see a raise for teachers, but then they'll put instructional materials, here, and limit the type of materials and books that children have access to. So we're going to have to be vigilant literally for the last 2 weeks of session, because they can do whatever they want to do. They can attach things to whatever they want to attach
that
them
don't need to be related.
Exactly. And many of the bills have been TP'd, so that's temporarily postponed. So the responsible wage ordinance, for example, it was TP'd in its last committee hearing. And so what does that mean? They could potentially pull it and attach it to an economic package. Because again, wages, economics, as long as again, the title, the subject matter, they kind of are germane to the topic or related to the topic. Sorry, I'm saying germane. Related to the topic, they can attach it. And so that's the thing that we're going to have to watch the closest during this time. And so now what we're asking is that people take action. Like we need
literally, there are things that you can do. It's not over until it's over.
We need y'all to take action, y'all. Like, so the Black Collective, we've drafted this letter that again is about our legislative priorities. And again, we've reduced it down to the bills that are actually moving, that actually have legs, that are of grave concern to us, that we need people to actually reach out to their state legislatures to tell them to vote no on these bills when they start moving to the House floor, because it's been very disappointing to see the number of Democrats that voted for the anti-protest measures, that have voted for the fees instead of security deposits bill. So obviously there's some things going around, whether there's some trading going around, whether there's some selling of the soul that's going around just to get something on the budget that the governor will then veto in the first place. Makes no sense whatsoever. And so we are asking you all to take action and sign this letter. And when you fill out the letter, you know, it's asking for your address, because on the back end, it is going to automatically send it to your state House member and to your state senator.
So sign up. I dropped it in the chat. You can also see it on your screen. You can also find it on our website, as well as on our social media pages.
Yes, yes. And
if you are not following the Black Collective, thank you, friend. Then we are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. We actually just joined LinkedIn. You know, we're trying to be everywhere. And you can also go to our website, theblkcollective.org.
Yeah.
So join us for so after legislative session is over, we are going to be doing a final session where we're going to recap where everything stands based on all of the bills that we're tracking, what was passed, what wasn't passed, and give you all an update on next steps. Because even when bad things pass, we're still going to continue to fight them. So
exactly. Yeah, because I'm like, at the end of the day, again, we got a lot of work to do. This is an election cycle. I'm like, Chris, I don't know if you want to go into that right quick. Redistricting.
So here's my 1 second. My 1 second spiel is this ballot in November is going to be very long, because all of your House members, all of your Senate members at the state level, all of your House members at the federal level, and then all of your local government pretty much is going to be on the ballot on top of ballot initiatives. So don't worry, we got you. We will definitely be pivoting to explain what is happening with redistricting, as well as preparing you for the 2022 election. So again, follow us, stay tuned, but know that everything is connected. And the number one thing that we can do is hold people accountable at the ballot in November. Well, actually in January when you're primary, and then again in November.
Yeah, because I'm just like, we got the August primary, we got the general election.
We got new districts.
We got all these new districts. And so we got a lot of work to do between now and November. And there's going to be many opportunities and ways to engage with the Black Collective, volunteering with us, going out and knocking doors with us in our communities, because again, at the core of our work is political education, because again, it's almost kind of like that more you know thing that they used to tell us.
Exactly. When you don't know what's happening, they can get over on you.
Yeah, they can. Exactly.
We're going to make sure that you are informed and prepared so that we can stop bad things from happening.
Yes, and that is purely and solely our responsibility. And so again, what I would say is, if you haven't registered already, you can literally go to our website for the March 12th event. And we will literally be debriefing everything. We're going to be talking through everything. We are going to be answering questions about next steps, because again, it doesn't even stop there. We do have a next step, and there are community partners across the state that are already starting to work on that, which is what we call a veto letter, because now after the legislative process, we now have to do some hardcore advocacy towards the governor to be like, we need you to veto some things. We don't know what this governor, what
he actually do it.
But we got to do our part to make sure that our voices are heard so that he hears our concerns around some of these bills. And so we're going to be actively doing some veto campaigning work of like, we need you to veto these things and don't let them become law. So stay tuned.
And remember, he needs folks votes in November. He's also on the ballot. Just saying. Yeah. So on that note, stay tuned. Please, please, please join us in taking action to stop, pay attention to what's happening over the next 2 weeks, and we'll be back.
Yes.